And we're going to be talking today, really looking at about how these unprecedented times have really changed what we've seen in signage and digital signage. And, we're going to have a discussion about the state of the market. I think some changes we've seen, some opportunities and some challenges as well. And I'll say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to send those in via the chat option, and we'll reserve some time at the end of the conference to go through those questions then. So I guess just before we start, Dee, do you want to give us just a quick 2 minutes on Signagelive, just for those people who may not know Signagelive? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. We, as a company, we are a cloud-based digital signage provider. So we focus only on the software, and we've been around, something I think which will become probably even more apparent as we go through the next few months, for over 20 years. And we continue to obviously do bigger and better things. We are global, like I say, so we have offices in Chicago, good old UK, although I am from my home office, as is everybody else at the moment that's working remotely, Singapore and Australia. So the focus for us has always been the software side, how to leverage the cloud and the possibilities of cloud to really build enterprise and scalable applications, specifically, of course, for digital signage. We've always worked through the channel, hence why we are all here gathered together and having the relationships with Maverick.
Fantastic, thank you. And Florian, introduce yourself.
Well, Invidis Consulting, I founded the company 2006, so almost 15 years ago. We're based in Munich, Germany. We don't have offices in Australia, but I would love to open one there. But we have partners around the world who work for us. We are a boutique consultancy, and we are advising customers as well as industry better understanding what role digital signage as well as other digital technologies can take in their daily routines. And we've done it for many years. We also operate a joint venture together with ISE, so we also share offices with ISE. Most of you know ISE and DSS, our conference. We do them around the world. Unfortunately, this year, most of them we had to cancel, but usually they're in Mexico, in Brazil, in Dubai, in China, all over the place. But for the last 3 months, I've been here now in Munich, and was really excited last week for the first time to hop on a plane again.
And we were just talking before we started that as Florian just said, he was the only person I know that's managed to travel when he got on a plane last week for the first time, and what an experience that must have been for the first time, right?
Especially being the only passenger on board. That was very special. It only happened to me once before, many moons ago. No, it was very special. Yeah, it was very special. And we all hope, I think, that, life will be more normal in the future. For the time being, it's quite cumbersome. It takes a lot of time, and it's no experience at all. And when we talk about digital signage, we always talk about, engaging with customers and offering experiences, and traveling is touchless travel. It's the opposite of any experience you could imagine.
Did you, out of curiosity, did you notice any differences? Because of course, when you're used to traveling so often, sometimes things become a thing of the norm and you just walk past them. But did you notice any differences in taking into account the current pandemic? More signage, better signage even, sometimes, like I say, it's missing.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, probably not so much in the UK, but the rest of the continent, most of the time you don't recognize stores again because it's full of plexiglass, and you have printed signage all over the place. Lots of printouts because many of them haven't managed really to integrate this in their digital systems, and a lot of stickers on the floor, stickers and everything. And I mean, you have to keep distance to everyone else, but it's very difficult on a plane with 300 people, or 250. 500-meter queuing, which is not possible in the airport. Yeah. So that's what the airlines, the airports are currently struggling with. It's very difficult to keep this distance. So they're thinking about having time slots when you board your plane, when you go to the gate. But somehow people need to wait, so it's very difficult. No, it's very different, and it's not very pleasant, to be honest.
And I think we'll tackle more of that throughout the next kind of 35 minutes as well, which is that we're seeing, certain industries starting to return to work, and they're doing things now, trying to work out the best way of doing those, but those things will then become the norm more in the future as well, I guess. So Joan, I know you wanted to kick off with a question.
Yeah. So I was thinking about the first question, and I think it's a very simple one. So how have you both have reacted to this unprecedented event? Because I think it was quite fast for all of us. So how Signagelive, Invidis, the first reaction to the situation? I think
Ladies first?
Aferdita.
Yeah, ladies first. Okay. Well, it's an interesting one because I remember going to ISE thinking, is this going to, even prior to going actually, is this going to happen? Is it not? Because there are, as we all know, some big names pulling out, and it was kind of on the brink whether it was going to be continued or not, and it did. And for me and for us, that was certainly the last show that we had. And I think thereafter, the realization very much dawned, certainly on the UK, in terms of, things are going to start to be getting locked down, and business was going to be impacted. And I think for us, it was good in some ways. I say good because first and foremost, I mentioned before in our call, we're still 100% staff. So thankfully that is the case for us. I know it's not unfortunately been the case for a lot of other businesses out there. And it's kind of hard to see people being affected that way. But from our perspective, we already, yes, we're a cloud business, but we're already using cloud tools, so we could make the switch pretty quickly to just working from home. Of course, there is more than just tools. It's about mentality and basically not burning yourself out because you're permanently on Zoom calls, as we know. But from our perspective, I think what we did was, look, where is our business come from? There was a split between kind of retail, and I'm talking about the main bulks, because of course we can cater a lot of other industries. The main bulk was coming from retail and workplace communications. So for sure, when it started to hit and the closures, we had some customers that paused their licenses because their stores had shut. So as a gesture of goodwill, we also did the same, rather than continuing to charge for the service that they had. But we're starting now, those same customers that maybe back in March, April started doing that, they're coming back online, which is good. But again, it differs because of the different countries that we operate in. So sometimes you'll have France coming on, and then Italy thereafter, and maybe Germany a little bit further behind. That's not because of the country itself, but because of the go-to market strategy that particular retailer might have. So we're having to deal with these kinds of things, and working whenever we can, kind of hand in hand with those partners, rather than just being told, well, actually, yeah, we're back on now, can we switch them on, or likewise switch them off. But interestingly, the workplace communications, this is the biggest thing for Zoom, where we're all using it. Just because people are working remotely, that doesn't mean to say that you can't have, well, you let go of the need to communicate. If anything, probably a lot more so. And that's kind of what we were thinking about, because, Joel, this, and of course, Joan, the way that Signagelive works is you have one device or one license per device, regardless of where that is at. So if you've got 1,000 locations, you need 1,000 licenses. And we were thinking to ourselves, like, how do we try and help people, and also think of a different way of how things will evolve further down the line, as to how we communicate. Because digital signage, or some form of signage in some way, shape or form, will still need to be very much there in the marketplace to help people out. So we launched the broadcast license, which is basically a bit of a reverse of what people know Signagelive as, and it's literally one URL which I can send to you. I can ping it in the Zoom chat here with whatever message it is that I want to be saying, whether that's a live stream, whether it's something that the CEO has got a message for every Friday perhaps, or a gathering, social gathering for people in the team. And we've seen that a lot of people have taken that up because there are people on furlough, which may not necessarily have access to the internal systems, but at the same time, they still need to be kept informed in some way, shape or form about what's happening and what's the latest guidelines. Or it could be a teacher, when they're ramping up to open up the schools, not everybody can have those teachers' meetings all in a confined space. So how do we keep them up to date? Same thing can be applied for, drivers that are all of a sudden now, we've all seen the text messages when we've been getting stuff from Amazon saying, we're no longer handing parcels to residents, we're going to leave it here and then take a picture to show that we've delivered it. But those kinds of things, different regulations and compliance messages and rules can be sent and amended on the fly. So I think for us, that was a big uptake on the broadcast player, which we released, which is we wanted to do it for free to see, first of all, whether there be an uptake, and there was, and it's now available for free until the end of September 2020 to take people through that need of basically saying, look, we still have the requirements to speak to our customers and our employers.
But the idea of the broadcast player was pre-pandemic, or it was actually something
It
new?
was because of the pandemic.
Okay.
Because like I say, as a concept is completely different. So because of that, we thought to ourselves, how are we going to do this? And credit to our team, basically. We're always having this internal battle as to what the priorities is for, as we all know, in a software house from a development perspective. But this was one of the things which we did and we released. And there's been some really good feedback from customers.
Okay. And Florian, what about from an industry point of view? So you have like an eye on everything. So.
Well, my life changed dramatically. Obviously, our life did. Usually, we travel 3-4 times a week. We're on the plane. At least once a month, probably North America or so, and then Asia or so. So I really travel extensively, and I haven't been on the plane for 3 months now until last week. So yes, our business has changed a lot, especially our consulting business, which is very difficult, especially the M&A business, which has come to a complete halt. For various reasons. Obviously, it's very difficult, to value companies currently, because it's very difficult to see how the business is continuing in the future. But also, it's a very personal business. And even if a few of the M&A things are almost, down to the finish line, people want to meet in person, have a glass of wine and really get an understanding, if it makes sense or not to sell or to work in the future together. And that's something you cannot do via Zoom. So that's obviously something which is very difficult. In general, we have been in touch with most of our customers doing endless hours of Zoom, endless hours. And we've discussed it prior to this call already. It's very, very, it's very tiresome, spending 10 hours a day without any break just in front of Zoom, and with no time to take notes or so, not even relax a little bit while you're flying back home or so. So that's quite exhausting. Otherwise, we're in touch with our customers. It works quite well. Our event business, obviously, is pretty bad. We had to cancel pretty much all the events around the world for the remainder of the year, more or less. And that's difficult. And now we're working very close because we have a joint venture with IC. We're very close on our Barcelona event, which is hopefully coming up in February. But obviously, always, with the fear that maybe the second wave will hit Europe or so.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very difficult. But at the end of the day, I think we in Germany are a little bit lucky because our life is a little bit more back to normal than compared to UK or Spain or so. So the beer gardens are open again in Munich. That's the most important thing, besides going to a church. For most Bavarians, it's a beer garden. So beer gardens are open again, and haircutters and everything. So the biggest problem, personally, is that the kids haven't been to school for 3 months.
Yes.
And so that makes it very difficult. But I'm very lucky. I live only a kilometer away from my office. So I walk every day. I've never done any home office, so that's okay. But no, life is very, very different, and in small steps, it's getting back to normal, and hopefully, we will see better times in the new normal in fall.
And Florian, I guess, just as Joanne asked you the question as well, I was just suddenly thinking then that for you, where your role and your reputation is, that you have such a wide knowledge of the business and a deep knowledge of the business. I guess what happened, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, it's more of a question, but I guess when we started to enter into these unprecedented times, you had people coming to you straight away, right? And saying, what do we do? What do we do? Was there a lot of that? Did you get a lot of people?
Yeah, and a lot of sad stories. We have, many people trust us. And so we've seen their numbers, and especially the first weeks were very, very, very frustrating for everyone, and very sad also, because we looked at the numbers and we saw, that doesn't look good. And to be honest, we see that we are quite scared about fall because, currently there's still special regulations, but we will saw a lot of insolvencies in fall. And so many of the smaller players, will leave the market, which is always a sad thing to see. Yeah, no, we have been very busy and contacted, and usually, I speak with probably 24 players every week, longer talks. And now everything has been done by Zoom, which is okay because I know many of them. But obviously, having a personal face-to-face meeting is always better.
And I think, John.
No, I said following what you said, no, and do you think that everybody talks about that collaboration, education seems to be recovering quite fast. So do you think that maybe there will be this investment in signage due to this situation, or because the companies will prioritize other investments?
Oh yeah, it's a double-sided sword, to be honest. Many of the retailers need to invest because there's these special regulations about access management, access control. And funnily enough, we were laughing about in the beginning, about these digital A-frames, saying who wants to have them? You always got them from China very cheaply, and you saw them at ISE. But they've become very, very popular because, regulations are quite strict and the number of people limited in stores it's quite limited. And so you need to have systems which manage access. In the beginning, you had all the security guys. But eventually, as they found out, this will be a long-term thing, not just a few days or weeks or so. They decided we need to, be more, have a long-term solution. So especially the high footfall stores like, Aldi, Lidl, places like this, grocery stores, and also electronic stores with lots of footfall, and they decided to invest into digital. So now you see across Germany all these displays and all the entrances, with little sensors which count how many people are inside the store, and they have like a traffic light system, when it turns green, you're allowed to go in and everything. And it works quite good.
In the UK, I think the same with Aldi. I remember seeing an article yesterday. It's quite simple, but effective. You don't need any more literally on the outside. It's like when you go to the airport and you can go to the X-ray machine. It's like basically green. You can go red.
Yeah.
Stop
and
right there.
And it's cheap. It's like 3,000 euros or so. That's what you spend on a security guard per month. So the payback, and to be honest, most retailers think they will need to work with it, for the next year or so until, we're all vaccinated. So that's something which will stick, and having a payback from a month, it's fantastic in times like this. And but some of the, more solvent grocery like Aldi, Lidl, so they decided to really have nice systems which they, which are really nicely designed, which hang from the ceiling and everything, and the cables are nicely mentioned, everything. So they really said, we keep it anyway. And we will use it for promotion afterwards.
I think, while we're talking about retail, it's such a big subject about, I guess, the changes that the retail environment has gone through, right? And I think we said at the beginning, there's certain projects that are really have been postponed. I've got to say, from our point of view, we haven't seen many projects completely stopped. We've seen projects postponed. I'd be interested to get your view on that. And I also, I think I would like to understand, Dee, perhaps you first, for inside retail, what the changing dynamics now inside retail. Beforehand, it was about getting people into store and keeping them in there as long as possible. And now, obviously, it's about how do we move them through quicker as possible. Where do you think signage plays a part in that and the kind of messaging around that?
Yeah, I think Lidl already had that contest won in the checkout system, didn't they? It's like the McDonald's of the retail world, to get as many people through the doors to make as much money. But it's an interesting point because, we talk about retail, but there's so many different aspects to it. We talk about supermarkets to QSR to, fast food chains, and we all know that they got shut down, albeit they were selling food, so to speak, depending on your flavors and what you like. But, that the whole point is that I think, and this is just from our experience so far, like you say, anything which was, games or something that wasn't related to basically food processing, etc., they did pause on any plans that they had for digital signage. Was it a knee-jerk reaction? Was it a budget cut because something was being, focused on something else? Perhaps a mixture of both. I think in hindsight, anybody who stalled and didn't do anything to help themselves for when they do come out of the pandemic, I think we'll probably see, not necessarily as much growth as potentially somebody else who has embraced the change with technologies and put them into place to make the customer really feel more reassured. We've all just said it right now. I've only gone around the block, so I can't tell you anymore, but every day we speak to people that say, I'm not comfortable going to X amount of place because how do I know what the hygiene is going to be like? And, the bigger the environment and the more crowded it is, consumer confidence could have an impact. Yeah, so sure. If you don't kind of, I guess, invest into making them feel better, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But I think certainly from a retail perspective, it is very much about, it's going to go back to people are going to probably adopt more the IKEA fashion, right? Where you have a designated line that this is how you're going to go around. Probably good for the retailer too, as opposed to you go in there and then you just swarm about like you normally would when we go to a supermarket. And I think probably that will benefit both parties, the consumer and of course the retailer, because I've been a culprit. I've gone into a store not even intending to buy something, but because I've gone past it, I've then bought it. So, this is why Axia is great at something like that. But I think more people are probably going to adopt it with the relevant signage to then put it into place to drive the adoption, really.
Well, that's true.
But I think there's this lack of confidence is a huge topic. And we see that over here, and stores are open already for 6 weeks over here. So you have long lines. People are scared of touching products, so they don't even go inside. So the retailers, they're really complaining a lot because they're losing a lot of business, and especially fitting rooms. So, for example, it's a huge problem. I mean, if you buy, if you go to a Zara or whatever, you want to try something on, and you don't want to, buy it and bring it back, because then you can order it online directly, So and so fitting rooms is a huge topic, and then also some other industries are really struggling a lot. So it's difficult, but it's not bad news for all, because we heard from many integrators here in Central Europe that they're quite busy because, many of the screens were turned off for 6 or 8 weeks. And they weren't, professional maintained and everything. Just somebody pulled the plug at the end of the day. So now they have to do all the service and everything. So these guys are quite busy. Obviously, not selling new touch points, but really fixing old stuff and putting maintenance back and everything. So they're quite busy. And some of the existing contracts are still being delivered and rolled out. So that's fine. And what's quite interesting, and we were quite surprised about that, some of the really large, the Fortune 500 customers we have, they're really thinking about doing new RFPs for next year. Because now they have the time. They had it anyway on the agenda for 2020, sometimes in fall or so. And they were all now confined to their own desk and had some more time. They started, and we got like 2 huge requests for projects, which were like, double-digit millions, like 50, 60 million euros, which is unbelievable, one of the biggest projects, And we couldn't believe it. I said, are you fooling us? I said, no, we planned this anyway. We have the budget for the next couple of years, but we decided now to start it earlier than before. So that's quite interesting to see.
I agree with that, actually. We've seen, we normally hold webinars and everything else like that. And sometimes you have to keep on knocking on the door to, to the company they want to be speaking with, tell them or convince them why they should be considering Signagelive or another product. And this time round, or certainly in the time that we've kind of been in lockdown, more and more people, certainly to begin with, before Zoom fatigue kicked in, were joining more of them, and they were actually more open to looking at saying, look, now I've got some time to myself as opposed to everything else that the business is throwing at me. I want to dedicate myself to actually learning a bit more about why this product versus another, which has worked well for us, of course, because we're still very much at the forefront from a CMS perspective. So I think people have been pleasantly surprised. They thought they knew Signagelive. I think I knew Signagelive, but then something else comes up next week. But then they know a lot more about it. So I think it's worked both ways, same as for the RFPs.
Oh, that's good, and that's what we like. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunities, no? So we have described what happened, that's happened, we cannot change that. And I think we have been working and explaining the channel about the merge of the AV and the IoT, and it seems that the IoT was a nice to have thing, but now it looks like a must. Do you think we are in front of IoT explosion solutions? And the second question is how we can scale that, how you adapt your platform or how you from Invidis help the channel to develop these type of solutions? What do you think about that?
Do you want to start or?
Yeah.
And me, sorry, yeah, sure. It's an interesting point. And again, I kind of possibly see it in a slightly different light, only because of my previous life prior to being with Signagelive for 6 years. I was involved for 5 years in the M2M world, so machine to machine, which is basically Internet of Things for many other people. It's just what's connecting to what and what's talking to what. And part of that jump was basically digital signage or M2M in moving vehicles and things like that. So from my perspective, I've always yearned for a proper adoption of, I should say, IoT, not just talking about it as a buzzword, but actually really, really embracing it. And I don't just mean the little, the stuff that everybody can do pretty much, of connecting to a fire alarm and the building management system is automatically triggering to your screen so that it changes with it. That's just one aspect. The biggest thing, and I think perhaps this is possibly one of the issues, is that there's such a vast array of what sensors and everything else you can bring in, whether it's a CCTV camera for access controls. Who would have thought that Axis and plenty of other companies out there that build these products would come and kind of play alongside digital signage? But we've done it before. We've done it 2 years ago. We were working on kind of access control type stuff with some projects. But I think what's lacking potentially is basically that one company that can bring it all together, because the technology is there. It's always been there. We've been talking about IoT, not necessarily for digital signage, for over 10 years. So I think what's really the crux of it, from my perspective and how I've kind of seen the two trying to merge together, because obviously all fall under IT, is just getting that one company, to kind of sell it as AV as a service. We've talked about this before as well, but I think more and more people are going to start looking at saying, look, I need it done properly. Who's going to be that one person or one company that I go to? If they want to be cutting budgets, then they'll probably want to do it themselves. And, good luck if you do, if you've got the skills at the time. But I think, especially when you're adding more pieces to the jigsaw puzzle, like IoT, right, rather than a straightforward, here's a picture on a screen, which is your usual historical digital signage, I think you'll need an organization that can bring it all together.
Yeah.
But Dieter, the bottleneck are the integrators, unfortunately. Because technology is there. It's not about technology. Technology has been there for a long time. But most integrators are still struggling really into integrating this one, as there are so many different solutions. And many of them are looking for a platform. And there are few players in the market who offer already a platform which connects like to dozen different devices or so, but it's still very difficult. You have all these different APIs, and and it makes life complicated. It's fine in a flagship store or something which is close by, but once you roll it out, across hundreds or thousands of stores, then it becomes painful. And unfortunately, it's not the CMS provider who can help, but it's really the integrator who needs to make it work. But customers are more than happy to take it. They're really, really interested in it, but not only with access control or mask detection, all of these cool things you can sell now. It's really about the integrator, really integrating it and making sense out of it.
And Florian, I mean, just give it. I guess we should clarify. Perhaps give us some examples where we think of that IoT and signage coming together. Where do you think that's important now?
Well, Dieter mentioned already. I mean, obviously, the CCTV cameras. And entrance for access control, but also inside the store, detecting if the person wears a mask or not, or especially checking, if where do you have queues, in front of the checkout or service desks or so. It's very important. It's when we talk about managing access control and managing crowds in the stores, not only in the entrance, but also inside the store, which becomes necessary. So it's a typical use case. But then we also have, all different kind of sensors. In a meeting room, for example, it doesn't always have to be, retail. In a meeting room, how many people is a meeting room occupied or not? I mean, the biggest problem with enterprises, people book the room in months in advance, and nobody uses them. And having small sensors, which detects is a person in the meeting room or not. That makes life much, much easier. And now we know also about oxygen and all of them, the number of people in the meeting room becomes a huge topic. We discussed it before the call started. Most offices now have a limit of 30 or maximum 50% of people allowed to work at the same time. And so how do you manage these crowds? How do you make sure, that not too many people are in certain parts of the building? And that's where sensors are really, really helpful. Very simple. The sensors are very cheap. It's really how to integrate them and how to integrate them in your processes, because you don't want to change the process of your whole company. You make sure that they support the existing ones, and that makes it complicated.
I mean, the same thing can be applied to click and collect, or even I think there was an article last week, maybe JCDecaux, and their relationship or partnership with or somebody or other. This is about, this is how we know digital out of home as is right now, maybe prior to COVID, and basically engaging with the people that are currently outside of your store to take that extra step and go inside. Because a lot of the time, you have this big, I just read this morning about the largest LED screen that was somewhere in New York that was put together. Massive screen that's been put together with random advertising. I'm sure it's not random, it's paid for, of course. But then linking it through to the stores that are in the vicinity to try and make sure that, people are making the most out of their advertising. I mean, IoT opens up so much potential out there. And I think part of that is the issue, because there's so much choice. What do you focus for? But we must not forget, I think, that once you have these things installed, access controls or the cameras don't just have to be used for access controls. They can be utilized for something else too. Actually understanding, if I've made the investment on this advertising to show X, Y, and Z to said customer, did it really pay off? Can I tweak my campaign to make sure that I'm showing the right message at the right time to the right person, which ultimately is the whole point of digital signage.
But Dieter, there are always the two ways. I mean, one is customer facing, the other one is really helping the vendor or the digital home network or so the media owner. You can really collect, like having sensors in a totem really makes sense, to measure temperature and to make sure, thermal management works and everything, or that you can replace certain components before they fail. So these are typical, IoT things behind the scene, which customer will never see. And then there's really one which really, improves the experience at the store with a digital device.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that just listening as you were talking there as well, and I think it's something we've explored beforehand, and I think Florian, you touched on it, the amount of skills that are now needed to deploy that end-to-end solution, I guess, because beforehand, when it was an AV, then it became a signage app, and that required some AV skills, but an understanding a bit of networking, etc., as we got content round. And now, obviously, we're talking about the integration of IoT, which is then about how do you start handling data, and more importantly, what do you do with that data, and then how do you trigger other things? I mean, what do you think? You said about system integrators, Florian. I mean, what's the advice, right? How do they go about getting such a broad amount of skills and talent to be able to deliver that?
Joe, that's exactly the challenge many small integrators currently face. Because, you need more and more skills. The beginning was just AV, then IT, content. Don't forget content, Most of the integrators forget about content. I have no clue about how it works. And now we're talking more and more and more, and now even big architecture firms are looking into offering digital signage services. Because for them,
honey, I shrunk Florian.
Don't open.
Very good.
You need more and more skills. That's the reason why, only some larger integrators will probably be able to survive in the future, because you need all these skill sets, or you need at least an ecosystem of partners who are able to deliver that. In the beginning, ecosystem is fine, but eventually our feeling is that you need to offer it in-house, end-to-end thing to be really successful. Because
I think it shows in the most recent acquisitions that have been made public. I think you can see that there are AV focused companies now joining hands, or being bought out, whatever you want to say, with other IT focused companies. And that's really the reason why, you can't scale up people. It takes time to scale up people and bring them through, the grassroots and all of that. It won't have an impact until later on. So for those that can, they have been buying it in with the various different acquisitions. And I think for the smaller ones, they'll either, as you said, Florian, will need to be adaptable and train themselves up quickly, or make a niche for themselves in some way, shape or form.
And it's quite interesting when you look at UC, for example, which tech data is your main thing, looking at Surface Hub, for example, also, or even Samsung Flip, these were products that were mainly sold by IT integrators, not so much by typical AV integrators, because IT guys are very familiar with Microsoft. They know Samsung inside out and everything. And more about even Zoom. I mean, Zoom is a typical IT solution, not an AV solution. It's used as an AV tool, but historically, has been more popular with the IT guys. And so this is really interesting. So we see more and more in the corporate environment, especially compared to connected to facility management, all of these things. The IT guys are very good at it, and the IT guys are also better at offering global services. They know how to scale. AV integrators are usually, especially the smaller ones, are not usually as good, in scaling things. For them, it's just step-by-step thing. It's not really we call it industrializing projects. You only have a few larger integrators who are really good at having good processes. A quote comes in, and they do step-by-step and everything it's managed quite professionally. But most integrators are small. They see every project as a little arty thing. They want to manage, and that's difficult.
Yeah. So, and Florian, and talking about these corporate environments, you mentioned, and we were discussing about the new office is going to be less people, shifts between groups, and so on. And signage in corporate environments has been mostly used for sales, KPIs, and things like this. So, what is the opportunity now in signage in corporate environments beyond the room booking systems?
Well, it's way guiding. It's obviously when you don't have a fixed desk anymore, to find your colleagues, to manage, flows. It's even more important to communicate messages to your employees, via all platforms. It's not a single game anymore. So that's the reason why Microsoft Teams, for example, it's something which becomes more and more important in the digital signage environment. People look at Teams like, this is not a digital signage game. And Signagelive would say, you cannot use it. And you probably have some good reasons for that. But in the corporate environment, especially on campus, Teams can be a good CMS, to a certain extent. Because SharePoint, they know how to work SharePoint and everything, and the data is anyway in the system. So there are more and more customers who think, that could be an alternative to digital signage. If it is.
But you raised a good point there, actually, because, and it kind of goes back to what you said earlier about the content being the last thing to be thought about. In retail, it has to be designed specifically for a product or a line, et cetera, whereas what we're finding, and certainly our experience, is that in the corporate world, 50% of that content already exists, whether it's Power BI, somebody's crushed the numbers and it's now a dashboard, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Microsoft Teams, whether it's Yammer, they've already spent time congratulating people or whatever it is that they are, Slack, etc., that they're already doing. So all that to make it easier, to less frictionless, I guess, to move and embrace digital signage, just to say, well, actually, why can't I just plug in Power BI? Why can't I just use Yammer or what have you? Which people, of course, can, and YouTube, because these are already channels that they've got their hands dirty with. They know how to do it. That you're not teaching them something completely new. So I agree with you. People are looking at that.
But Dieter, we both know that you need to redesign your content to be successful. Every platform, every screen has a different mindset.
Different resolution, yeah.
So, even if you have the same, Power BI, whatever you have, you can use it one-to-one and integrate it very easily in Signagelive or whatever. But when you have a big screen, in front of the canteen or so, you need to show the content totally different to engage with your audience. It's totally different when somebody looks at his phone or on his desktop computer or so. And it's easier, and I 100% agree. I would say that probably 90% of the content already exists in the organization when you look at campus installations. It's just, how do you change the content? How do you present the content to reach out and to engage with the audience?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking as well. I was thinking about this kind of dramatic change in what we're talking about here, about how do we reach audience with new content. We've talked about IoT. I mean, our time's nearly up, by the way, guys. It's gone very quickly. But one of the things I was thinking about is privacy as well, right? So if we're now doing a lot more specific with people around IoT, analytics, and we are counting people, we're maybe measuring people, what do people need to think about in terms of privacy and GDPR, etc.? Are there considerations there, Florian, that people need to think about?
Oh yeah, I mean, technology is never the limit. It's always a cultural background and the society which sets the limits. And even with GDPR, you can do much more things than people would accept on the continent. In the UK, it's a little bit easier, but it's very strict over here. So yes, I mean, privacy plays a huge role. And it becomes even more important now, where we all have this, this COVID app, nobody wants to install, but still we need it somehow. And we all hope our neighbor uses it. But so that's privacy, it's a huge topic, but not so much in a corporate environment. Because people have signed NDAs and everything, and that's easier. With consumer data and in retail, it's very, very difficult. Same with digital form, makes it very, very difficult. But in a corporate environment, and Dieter, you probably know that better than me, but I think that's less an issue in most projects.
Yeah, for sure, because as you say, it's either employees of that organization or indeed people that have been invited to attend meetings. So you will at some point, especially if you're going into lockdown, MOD, defence sites and what have you, have signed something to say that you're signing your life away. But each country, again, deals with things in different ways. I remember talking about audience analytics company, French company, not naming any names, and they had to have specific conversations when it came to projects in Germany versus Spain because of the GDPR and privacy laws being different between those countries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from access control and everything else, these guys in the IT world will have already touched upon these things way before.
Yeah. So Joanne, have you got one?
Yeah, I have a question, and I don't know if we have any interactive display employee here attending the webinar, but the contactless paranoia, how are we going to face it in the following months? Because nowadays there's plenty of interactive screens. You touch everything to find a route or to select products. So how are we going to manage that?
It's a little bit like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off.
Yeah. I guess it's going to be like this. So.
Yeah, it's cleaning the screens. And to be honest, 4 weeks ago when it all started over here, we had one cleaning person assigned to every ticket machine at the central station. And once a customer bought a ticket, a person came, cleaned the screen, and the next came. And this has changed now, but the beginning was very difficult. And we had a whole seminar about it, a whole thing about it. And many people tried to, integrate disinfection stuff, so you can clean the screen, but they used too much of it. So you had all the residues on the screen, so people thought it was dirty, even was, all the cleaning stuff. So it's very difficult. It's about building trust. It's about building confidence, and it takes a while. And people will always prefer their phone, obviously, even more today than before. But still, you see more and more, some of them using pens in the beginning, with the ATM. But after a while, to be honest, now after 6 weeks, people get used to it. And people get back to their old habits. Not all of them, but more and more of them. And even me, I'm taking public transportation every day. In the beginning, I was really scared, after a while it was a mess, get used to it. And it's a new life. Life has to go on. And I think people will get used to it, and eventually they will use touchscreens again, because it's the most natural way of interacting with a device. The most natural way, obviously, is voice, but the second most convenient one is touch.
And also the phone has the remote control for almost everything, no?
Yeah. I mean, it's true, isn't it? I remember we used to have conversations about how, a family had gone shopping and the little kid constantly pressing the screens because they're expecting it to be touch screen. And now all of a sudden they're probably being, no, don't touch that, because of this, obviously a reaction to the pandemic. But as you said, Florian, I think the beauty of being human is that we soon forget. A lot of things that have happened in the past, and history has a habit of repeating itself. So no doubt we'll going back to touch screens. But interestingly, we are talking to a partner of ours who are, one of the things that they're doing as far as IoT and sensors is concerned is basically having almost a heat map of when a screen has been touched and where, and the frequency that it's been touched. So when you do then go and clean it, it's almost like this is the area that you need to clean, and that's the area that you need to do. If somebody gave me that job, it'd be therapeutic, but OCD at the same time. I like things like that.
I think we've got time just for a couple of questions. Let me just ask one that's come in. So the latest Future Source reports is positive about LFD business, even though there's been a drop in volume in the last 3 months. What's your view on that moving forward? So is LFD going to recover and in what kind of time frame? That's a crystal ball question, that.
Yeah, I have a huge crystal ball here, so
that's we expect that.
Everybody has.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with Future Source, but they know more than most of us, I assume. No, I can imagine, as I mentioned before, some of the bigger companies are already thinking about new rollouts for next year. So 2020 will be a disaster, but after that, and when you look at Asia, for example, and Future Source are always about global numbers in general. China is already, some of the retailers are even above last year. So Adidas, for example, they just announced some of their numbers. It's unbelievable, they have more sales than in 2019, in May. So these
everybody taking up running.
Yep, and so that's and airports. There's so much information now necessary at airports and public places, and so I believe large format display is definitely not dead, but it will change. Yeah. Obviously, the video wall display is dead pretty much. But it will be LED, and we've just been at Samsung last week, with a new the wall for business. We've all seen it, and it shows and everything, and they've really pushed this now really to be the next new normal, the new standard for LED. And so LED will definitely grab, at least in the larger space, and they will grab some market share. But the general thing, the LCD will be there. Absolutely. We could discuss, is LCD, is it OLED, is it QLED, all of these things, but the large form
display. Yeah, absolutely. Dee, any view on that?
No, I would agree with that. I'm sure that there'll be deals to be had as it starts to phase out more and more, but most definitely it's not a goner just yet, I wouldn't have thought.
Good, pleased to hear it. One last question, I guess, and so Florian, this is for you actually. So the digital signage yearbook, have you started to write it yet?
We're currently on. It will be published on July 1st.
There we go. Fantastic. We look forward to it. Hey, listen, guys, we're out of time. It's been a fantastic discussion. I wish we'd scheduled longer, to be fair. I think for me, just listening to everything that's been said, it feels like that we feel buoyant about the market, but we all understand that there's changes that have to be made in order to be able to address the new opportunities, right? And I think we're saying that there's new opportunities we see in the retail environment, albeit that being combined with IoT and analytics, as we've said. I think in the workplace, we're saying that actually we know that corporate communications and signage is going to start to play a much more significant role in that market, both in an IoT and analytics way, but also in a pure messaging to your staff way as well. And I think, you know, I feel really confident about the market. I think the interesting area is that portfolio of skills that's needed, and whether that's with an ecosystem or a distribution partner that can help with those. I think there's good opportunities for all. So I guess I'll just ask each of you any kind of closing comments. Dee, any closing comments from you?
Well, you've recapped it quite nicely there, Joel, but I would say that, you know, for me, the biggest takeaway is, if there is one silver lining out of COVID, is that people embrace technology, because it's always been there. It's just about bringing it all together to make it work for you, whether that's retail, workplace communications. And the biggest thing for that is getting somebody that understands to do it. You know, as vendors, when we sit at the top of the, you know, the so-called food chain, it's hard for us to bring everything together because we're just one piece of that jigsaw puzzle. So we need to get more and more people either scaled up or, you know, understanding that it is a joint effort.
Yes, indeed. Great. Thank you. Florian?
For me, it's important. Experience isn't dead. You know, experience will come back because people are sick of staying at home, of Zoom and everything. They want to touch products. They want to experience something. They want to enjoy spaces. They want to enjoy, you know, being around people. And so, you know, people are desperate to leave home again and to experience something, going on vacation. I mean, we have this great backgrounds here. I would love to be in the pool now having a drink. That's the meanest part of the whole conference call. It's just like, you know, looking.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's very true, and if people have done, you know, the hard work and the legwork in between now and when the reopening properly starts, and they'll reap the benefits from it, because like you say, people are dying for some close contact, so to speak. Probably dying is the wrong word to use, but I'm sure you get what I mean. Looking for.
Yeah, I said that always, that people want to spend money right now. So I mean, some of them, if they can, and if someone goes to a shop now, it's because they want to buy. So there is so we need to maximize this experience, no?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So guys, thank you very much for taking the time. I know everyone's very busy. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And thank you, Dee from Signagelive, Florian from Invidis, thank you, Joanne, thank you. And I look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
everybody, for attending.
Bye.